The Kareth trade hub had seen better days. Once, it was the jewel of the Outer Rim, a sprawling marketplace where 1,000 species bartered, negotiated, and dreamed of fortune beneath the purple twin suns of Kareth Prime. But that was before the war, before the collapse of the interstellar trade accords, before desperation became the currency of survival. It was here, on a dust-choked street corner where the marketplace faded into industrial decay, that Commander Marcus Webb found her. She was small, smaller than any sentient being he'd encountered in his 14 years as a human explorer. Her skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Soft blues and greens that spoke of a physiology fundamentally alien, fundamentally other. Her arms hung limply at her sides, each one thin and delicate, with fingers that tapered to translucent points. Her eyes, all 6 of them, were closed, and her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps that made Marcus's chest tighten with something he couldn't quite name. A thin durasteel chain ran from her wrist to a pole driven into the cracked ground. Above her head, scratched onto a piece of warped synth plastic, were words in the simplified trade common that no species bothered to read anymore. Marcus stopped. The crowd flowed around him like water around stone. Other merchants, other buyers, other species too absorbed in their own survival to notice the small, chained figure. He'd been coming to Kareth for supplies, just another run to resupply before the long journey back to the human colony. But now, standing in front of this impossible, tragic sight, he found his feet wouldn't move. Marcus approached a nearby vendor, a Fex merchant with chitinous mandibles and eyes that reflected light like polished obsidian. The creature was old, weathered by countless transactions and countless years. "What's the story with her?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the chained woman. The Fex didn't even look up from his inventory display. "Problem, not property. Nobody's taking her. Even free, she's a burden." "Why's she chained?" "Because she walked away once. Tried to leave when she thought nobody was watching. Now we chain them so they don't waste our time. She's a Verdanti. That's what's left of her kind anyway. The war didn't leave many of them alive. The ones who survived, well, let's just say they're damaged goods. Unstable. Useless." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Damaged. The Fex finally looked at him, mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. "Look at her more carefully, human. They say her mind is fractured. She doesn't speak, doesn't respond. The merchant who had her tried for weeks. She's a vegetable. Free or not, she's worthless." And that, Marcus realized, was the tragedy of it all. Not just that she was enslaved, but that her enslavement had become so routine, so accepted, that no one even saw it anymore. She wasn't a prisoner. She was invisible, an inconvenient problem wearing a borrowed body. He walked back to her. This time he crouched down, meeting those closed eyes at their level. Up close, he could see the scars on her skin. Thin lines where the bioluminescence didn't quite reach, patches of her color pattern that seemed faded and wrong. Her breathing remained shallow, her body completely still. "Hey!" he said softly, knowing it was probably useless. "Can you hear me?" The Verdanti's 6 eyes snapped open. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like lights flickering to life in the darkness. Her pupils, if they were pupils, dilated and contracted rapidly, focusing on him with an intensity that made Marcus lean back. Her breath hitched, her forearms jerked against the chain, and for just a moment, fear crossed her face. Raw, primal fear that spoke of deeper horrors than simple captivity. "It's okay," Marcus said, his voice even more gentle. I'm not going to hurt you." Her breathing slowed slightly. The bioluminescence on her skin intensified, cycling through patterns he hadn't seen before. Deep indigos, sharp magentas, colors that seemed to vibrate at the edge of his perception. Her mouth, a delicate, alien thing with mandibles of its own, opened and closed. Nothing came out, but something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, a moment of connection that transcended the vast gulf of evolution and biology and species. She saw him, and for the first time in what might have been a very long time, She was not alone. Marcus made a decision. It wasn't a military decision. It wasn't a diplomatic decision. It was something far more dangerous to a man with his background. An emotional one. "I'm getting you out of here," he said simply. He stood up and walked back to the Fex. "What's your price for her?" The vendor looked up, mandibles clicking in rapid succession. "There is no price. She's a gift to whoever can haul her away and keep her. A tragedy of war, human. You should mind your own business. The Verdanti are a closed species, already nearly extinct. What do you care?" "I'm human," Marcus said. "We care." "Care?" The Fex's laugh was a sound like wind chimes made of bone. "I have heard stories about humanity, about your species that expanded too quickly, fought too hard, built too much. You're useful soldiers, excellent engineers. But caring? That's how species die human. That's how they end up like her. Chained in the corner of a marketplace, invisible even to the galaxy." Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he keyed his comm unit and contacted the captain of his ship, the Meridian. 5 minutes later, a legal document transferred through the trade hub's outdated AI system transferred ownership of the Verdanti to him. No payment required. She was his now. All hers became his problem, just as the Fex had predicted. When he returned, he knelt beside her and reached for the chain. She flinched, a full-body convulsion that nearly broke his heart. "I know," he whispered. "I know you're scared, but I'm going to free you now. This might hurt a little." He used a plasma cutter from his belt. The chain burned and fell away. For a long moment, the Verdanti woman didn't move. She simply stared at her wrist, at the absence of the metal that had defined her existence. "Come on," Marcus said, extending his hand. His four-fingered, very human hand, toward her. "Let's go home." She didn't take his hand. Not immediately. Instead, she struggled to her feet, her legs apparently unused to movement, shaking and wavering beneath her. Marcus stabilized her, one arm around her torso, and they moved slowly through the marketplace. The other merchants didn't even glance at them. The Verdanti woman was no longer a curiosity. Now she was simply gone, forgotten already. But on the ship, everything changed. The medical bay's diagnostic systems ran for nearly 2 hours. Marcus waited in the observation room with the ship's doctor, a gruff human woman named Chun who had seen war and suffering on a scale that made most people want to forget. "Her species is remarkable," Chun said, eyes fixed on the readouts. "Psychologically, look at this, her neural patterns should be showing severe trauma response. PTSD, neurosis, complete psychological breakdown. But instead what?" Marcus asked. "Instead, she's hopeful. Actually hopeful, Marcus. Despite everything, despite a war that annihilated her entire civilization, despite months or years in captivity on that marketplace, her neural patterns show distinct hope markers. This species doesn't break. They adapt." And then the Verdanti woke up. She opened her eyes slowly this time, and they swept across the medical bay with understanding rather than fear. She saw Chin. She saw Marcus. She saw the viewport beyond, where the stars wheeled in their infinite dance. And then she spoke. Her voice was like wind through crystal caverns. Haunting, beautiful, utterly alien. It took a moment for the ship's translator to process her words, but when it did, they appeared in text on Marcus's retinal display. "I thought I would never see them again. The stars. I thought that was over." Then she wept, not with loud sobs. Her alien physiology didn't produce tears, but her bioluminescence flickered in a pattern that Chen's instruments registered as extreme emotional discharge. Marcus moved to her side, and this time, when he extended his hand, she took it. "You saved me," the translator rendered her voice. "I do not understand. You are human. You have no obligation to my kind. We are nothing to you." Marcus thought about the Fex's words, about how humanity spreads too wide, fights too hard, builds too much, about how caring was apparently a luxury the galaxy couldn't afford. "That's where you're wrong," he said softly. "When I saw you chained to that pole, You stopped being nothing to me. You became everything, everything that matters. You became a person. You became someone worth saving. The Verdanti's colors brightened, cycling through patterns that the translator struggled to match to her words. So instead, Marcus understood through pure emotion, through the universal language of gratitude and wonder. She wasn't just any Verdanti anymore. Her name, she told him, was Lyris. And as the Meridian set course for the human colony worlds, carrying a species thought extinct to sanctuary, something shifted in the galaxy's understanding. Not in the calculations of admirals or the strategies of warlords, but in something far more fundamental. Within 6 months, Lyris was thriving. She had learned trade common, then standard English. She had helped the colony's engineers solve a problem with their terraforming systems, a Verdanti perspective on atmospheric chemistry that no human had considered. She had made friends. She had even started teaching the colonial children about her culture, about the history of her people before the war had come. The Fex would never have sold her. The Kareth merchants would never have recognized her worth. But the humans had, not because they were smarter or more advanced or even more enlightened than the other species of the galaxy, but because of something simpler, something that the starbound philosophers, in all their learning and all their understanding, had somehow missed. Humanity didn't save Lyris because she was valuable by conventional metrics. They saved her because she was alive, because consciousness itself, regardless of its container, was sacred to them, because a human could look at a broken, discarded being and see not a loss, but a person. Years later, when the story of the Verdanti woman and the human commander reached the ears of the Galactic Council, it sparked something unprecedented. Not a treaty, not a military alliance, but a question whispered in chambers where species convened. What do we not see in the corners we've stopped looking? And that question, more than any decree or law, began to change the galaxy. Not overnight, not completely, but it changed. And for the first time, the wider galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Not strength, not ambition, not the ability to survive where others could not, but the capacity to see worth where everyone else had decided there was none. To reach out a hand, even when that hand was so very different from the hand that reached back, and say, "You matter. You are not forgotten. You are not alone." That was humanity. That was the thing that would echo through the stars long after the wars had ended and the marketplaces had crumbled to dust. If this story moved you, if it kindled something in your heart, subscribe for more stories of humanity reaching across the stars. Because there are so many stories yet to be told. Stories of connection, stories of courage, stories of what it means to be human among the infinite. Thank you for listening to the stars with us.